Configure VLAN on built-in switch chip in MikroTik. So in this video, configure VLAN on built-in switch chip in MikroTik. For the objectives of this tutorial, we will know what is VLAN on a hardware level. We will then proceed with the configuration of VLAN using the built-in switch chip. And finally, we'll have some verification and testing with our configuration. For devices that don't have any built-in switch or VLAN capability on a hardware level, we have bridge VLAN filtering configuration. It is recommended that if your device is capable of VLAN switching on a hardware level, then you should configure it in such a way that you will utilize the switch chip of that device. So what we have here is a summary of what we will be doing in terms of the configuration needed for this tutorial. We will make our port number 3 and 5 to be an access port and assign on VLAN 10, while port number 4 will be also an access port, but this time on VLAN 20. We will add a VLAN 10 interface or a layer 3 interface with an IP address assignment of 192.168.10.1/24, and we will also have a VLAN 20 layer 3 interface with an IP address of 192.168.20.1/24. We will have some test clients to be connected on these ports so that we can test if there is reachability, particularly among clients with the same VLAN when inter-VLAN routing or layer 3 VLAN interfaces are not yet configured. So we have 3 MikroTik devices for our demonstration. So we have VLAN, Client 1 and Client 2 system identities. So our VLAN is a hub AC light. So this will be our device that we will configure our VLAN on a built-in switch chip. So we have some test clients, Client 1 and Client 2. So Client 1 is another hub AC light and is connected on port number 3 of our hub AC light, wherein our VLAN configuration will be there. So another is Client 2, but this time it's a hub light MikroTik device and it's connected on port number 4 on our hub AC light. I just want to quickly show you the configuration on client number 1. So actually there is really no configuration here. There is no bridge. There is no ports that is assigned to the bridge. All is configured that is on our client 1 is simply an IP address. So 192.168.10.100/24 on port number 1. So this is the only configuration here in our client number 1. Client number 2 is also about the same as our client number 1. So there is no ports or bridge ports that are configured, or a bridge is configured. There's no bridge VLAN. So all that is configured here is simply an IP address. So 192.168.10.200, so /24, and is configured on port number 1. Alright, so now I'm connected to our hub AC light VLAN device. So let me just show you quickly that on this particular device, so practically no configuration that is present. So under interfaces, there are no VLAN interfaces. Here in the bridge menu, there is no bridge VLAN configured. So actually there is no bridge Then IP address, so there is no single IP address that is configured here. So practically this is a blank device or blank hub AC light without any default configuration as well. So if you take a look at the firewall filter rules, so even the firewall filter rules are not present. So it's a blank device. So under interfaces, so let me show you. So on port number 1, so this is where this computer, where our Winbox utility is connected. So not really here in the diagram, but this is our virtual machine that is connected on port number 1. So our client 1 or our hub AC light is connected on port number 3, and on port number 4 is our hub light. So we will now start our configuration. So we will create a bridge. So we go to the bridge tab, click the plus sign and type in your bridge name. But for us, we will just accept the defaults and click OK. For the bridge ports, we will configure Ether3 and Ether4 to be our bridge port members. If this hub AC light is connected to another VLAN aware device, then we should add it on that particular bridge port also. But for our demonstration, it's port number 3. So port number 3, click OK, and also port number 4, apply OK. We will not add port number 1, which is the assignment for this particular virtual machine, as it's not covered within the scope of our demonstration. So only port number 3 and port number 4. We will not configure any VLAN, and as well as here in the ports, we will not configure any port VLAN ID assignment as well. So they will remain as the default configuration. Also, here in our bridge settings, so here in the VLAN tab, we will not check bridge VLAN filtering, okay, since we will implement VLAN on a built-in switch chip. So that's about it on our bridge configuration. So we have a bridge, we have ports, we don't have any VLANs. So we'll close this one. And first, how would we know that there is a switch chip in this particular device? So if you go to the menus and you will see switch here, and if you click this particular menu, if you found something here under the switch tab, so in my case we have the Atheros 8227, so that will be the switch chip for this hub AC light. Or we could go to the new terminal and issue the command interface ethernet switch print, and when you press enter, and if there is a value with this one, so you will see that you have the same Atheros 8227 switch chip for this particular device. So for simplicity, we will just make use of the GUI. So we will go to the switch menu. So under the switch menu, we have switch tab, port, port isolation, host, VLAN, and rule. And for our demonstration, we will just configure here in the port tab and as well as on the VLAN tab. Let's do some configuration first here under the port tab. So as you can see, you have port number 1 to 5 and the switch 1 CPU. So this is equivalent as well on the bridge VLAN filtering the bridge itself. So here, port number 3 and port number 4 are connected, and we will also configure port number 5, which 3 and 4 and 5 are all access ports. As you can see at the VLAN mode, all are disabled, so no VLAN that is running on these ports. So we will also make some changes on this one, as well as the VLAN header and the default VLAN ID setting. So let's configure port number 3 first. So we select port number 3, we double click, and here we can change VLAN mode, VLAN header, as well as the default VLAN ID. So on the VLAN mode, we can select secure. For VLAN header, for an access port or untagged interface, so we will select always strip. And for the default VLAN ID, so since the VLAN assignment for port number 3 is VLAN 10, so we will type in 10 or 10 here in the default VLAN ID. Click apply and click OK, so to commit to the changes. Next, we will configure port number 4. So we'll select port number 4, we double click, and we change the VLAN mode to secure. The VLAN header for untagged interface is always strip or an access port. The default VLAN ID will be 20. So take note, although the IP address assignment for port number 4 here, 192.168.10 as well, so I just want to illustrate that when they are on different VLAN, although they are on the same subnet, they would not be able to communicate. So that's what we are after, why we have this particular address. So default VLAN ID is 20. So click apply, click OK. So next will be our port number 5. So there is no one connected yet. So what we will do here is later, we will transfer the connection of our hoplite from port number 4 to port number 5. So by then, so port number 5, so we'll configure it to VLAN mode secure. It is also an access port, and the VLAN ID is 10. So take note, the VLAN ID is 10, so it's the same VLAN ID on port number 3. So when we transfer hoplite from port number 4 to port number 5, so expected they will be able to communicate. So click apply here and click OK to commit to the settings changes. Just a quick review with our switch port configuration. So port number 3, secure, always strip, VLAN ID 10. Ether 4, we have VLAN mode secure, always strip, default VLAN ID 20. And port number 5, which will be our spare port, is VLAN mode secure, VLAN header is always strip, and default VLAN ID is 10. So most likely our ports are in place, or we will just come back here once we have some issues. So next we will go to our VLAN tab. So this becomes our VLAN table or VLAN database. So as you can see, there are no VLANs that are configured in this particular tab. So we have VLAN 10 and we have VLAN 20 from our previous configuration. So we need 10, 20 on our VLAN tab. So we will click the plus sign and put in the VLAN ID 10, and that will be port number ether 3, port number 3, and as well as ether 5 or port number 5. So VLAN 10, port number 3, and port number 5. So next we will add the VLAN 20. So we have VLAN 10. So let's add the VLAN 20 here. And for the ports, it will be only port number 4. So apply and click OK. So it's red here. So we'll just go into different tab and come back to the VLAN, and the red is gone. Okay, so there should be no issues adding VLANs. So just a review, VLAN 10 will be port number 3 and port number 5, so later. And switch 1, switch chip, and the VLAN ID is 20, and the ports is only ether 4 or port number 4. So now let's do a quick verification of our VLAN configuration. So I'm on client number 1. So let's do some ping test. So tools ping, and let's ping the IP of client number 2. So in that case will be 192.168.10.200. So remember, the VLAN layer 3 interfaces are not yet configured. So ideally, we should not be able to reach, because this is VLAN 10, this is VLAN 20, although they are on the same subnet. So click start, and there you go. So timeout, or there is no reply. So here I have transferred the port number 4 connection of our hoplite to port number 5. But take a look, so there is no S from the running flag of port number 5. So it gives us a hint that this is not part of the bridge. So we go quickly to the bridge, go to the ports, and there you go. Port number 5 is not yet added. So let's add port number 5 quickly, apply and click OK. So the same, we don't configure any VLAN here on the bridge menu. So now the Ether 5 is with a slave flag as well. So now let's head back to our client number 1. And there you go. We have the tools ping that is still running. We haven't closed this. So take note, we have no replies earlier. Then once we transfer our connection to port number 5, which is on the same VLAN, so there you go. We will now be able to reach our client number 2 hoplite device. So on the switching or layer 2 level, so this is the only thing that you will need to configure on your switch port as well as on your switch VLAN. But let us try what if we will add now our layer 3 VLAN interfaces here in our configuration, and what if we will implement some sort of inter-VLAN routing so that our device, so client 1, will now be able to reach client 2, and formally we will change our client 2 to become 192.168.20 this time, instead of the IP address of 192.168.10 subnet. So let's quickly add our VLAN interfaces first. So we go to interfaces, we select the very first tab, or we could also simply go to the VLAN here, but there is also drop down choices here, so we will select VLAN. So we could name our VLAN to whatever VLAN name that we want. What's important, the VLAN ID will be 10, and this will be assigned to the bridge. Okay, so the name of the VLAN ID, and where it is tied on what particular interface. So click apply, click OK. So we will add the second layer 3 VLAN interface. So that will be VLAN 20 for the name. Again, you could name it to a different name. So VLAN ID 20. So interface will be bridge number 1. VLAN 20, VLAN ID 20, and interface will be bridge 1. Apply. Okay. So now we have our VLAN interfaces. So next, we will assign IP addresses for our VLAN interfaces. So we will close the interface menu and switch menu for now. So we go to IP addresses. So we don't have any addresses. So let's type in 192.168.10.1/24 for VLAN 10. So we leave the network here, because when we click apply, it will automatically add up to the correct network address. So click OK. We will also configure another IP address, but this time on our VLAN 20 interface. So click apply, click OK. Let's do a quick check first on our client 1, see if we could reach our new VLAN 10 IP address. So that will be 192.168.10.1. Click start. And although I am directly connected to port number 3, somehow the ping is not working. So there is a clue from here that we have some additional configuration on our switch menu. We are back here at our VLAN Hub AC Lite device, and because we have some additional configuration needed in order for the VLAN interfaces to work. So what we can do here is on the switch 1 CPU, wherein our VLAN interfaces are contactable, so we should be enabling the VLAN mode as well. For the VLAN header, we could leave as is, but what's important is the VLAN mode will be secure or will be changed from disabled. Okay? Next, we go to VLAN, and on every VLAN ID, so we will go in and we will also add the switch 1 CPU port. Okay, so aside from Ether 3, Ether 5, we will add the switch 1 CPU. Click apply, click OK, and now let's take a look at our client, see if there are any progress that are made. Okay, so let's go to our client 1, and as you can see, we still have our running ping. So a while ago, so there is no reply to this VLAN 10 interface IP 192.168.10.1, but once we have done some changes with our switch configuration, that we add in our switch 1 CPU port, so there is now a reply to our VLAN 10 interface. While we are here, let's quickly add the route so that everything will go to 192.168.10.1. So that will be our default gateway. So that is why hopefully we could reach our client 2 once we change it to 192.168.20 subnet instead of 10. So let's click apply, let's click OK, and let's now also go to our client 2 and configure it. So we are now at our client 2 hoplite device. So let us quickly change the IP address. So instead of 10, let's make it 20. So our network will not be this one. So let's click apply, let's click OK. So take note, the network address is that one. So click OK. So the change of IP is needed because we now need to test if we could reach 192.168.20, that's something here, or 20.1 on our Hub AC Lite VLAN interface. Let us do some quick connectivity tests from our client to router going to the VLAN 20 interface. So we go to Tools Ping and we type in our VLAN 20 IP address. So 192.168.20.1, click start, and there seems to be no connection to our VLAN 20 interface IP. Let us investigate. We go back to our VLAN device, our Hub AC Lite, and if you take a look closely, we only add our switch 1 CPU on VLAN 10, but we never add it as well on our VLAN 20. So we go in and add in a new port, which is switch 1 CPU. So Ether 4 and switch 1 CPU port. So click apply, click OK. And to take note, so under interfaces, you notice that it is back on Ether 4 again. So it's from Ether 5, so I put it back on Ether 4 again. Okay, so now let's check our client to connection if there is a reply. So it's still running ping. So a while ago, so there is no connectivity to our VLAN 20 interface, but this time, so we have successfully configured the connection so that there is now a reply from our VLAN 20 interface. So while we are here at our client number 2, let's also configure the IP route so that anything will be passed to our VLAN 20 interface. So it's a default route. So click apply, click OK. So now that our clients have their respective default route, so client 1 we have configured a while ago, and client 2 has its own default route. So this is 192.168.10.100 and the client 2 is 192.168.20.200. So let's see if we are able to reach a different VLAN on a different subnet. So let's go to tools ping and let's ping the client 1 IP address. So that should be 192.168.10.100. So click start, and yes, we are now able to reach that particular client 1 even though it's on a different VLAN on a different layer 3 subnet. As a summary, in this video, configure VLAN on built-in switch chip in MikroTik. We should be doing our VLAN configuration on switch menu instead of bridge VLAN when our device is able to support on a hardware level. So we have configured VLAN on the built-in switch chip and tested that we are able to implement VLAN switching as well as inter-VLAN routing. I hope you find this tutorial useful. Thank you for watching.